Okay, so we are going to be looking at functions today. So this is the note. As you continue to write some of those programs some of those assignments, you will notice that your program will start increasing. The lines of code will start increasing. And sometimes when you are developing large applications, you will start noticing that some things are being repeated. So it becomes necessary for you not to repeat yourself when you are writing programs, so that you can guarantee the efficiency of the work, or rather the application you are writing. Okay. Now, when we talk about efficiency, we are talking about in terms of the response time of that application. And then secondly, in terms of the space that application takes in memory. So the two approaches that we use to evaluate a program is the time complexity and the space complexity. I've mentioned that when I was talking about data structures and algorithms. So instead of writing the same code over and over again, Python has a way of allowing you to group related codes into functions so that such blocks of code can be reused and it will be easier to maintain or to debug it. So by the end of this class, you are supposed to understand what functions are and why they are used. You should be able to define and call user-defined functions. In other words, you can create your own functions, and maybe in the line of your code, programming, you can call them at any point in time. And then you should be able to know how to pass arguments and return values from functions. Use default keyword and the variable length arguments. Understand variable scope. When we talk about the variable, we talk about the scope of the variable and whether it is local or global. All right, now we talk about built-in functions and how to write custom ones for specific tasks. So what is a function? Okay. Our definition says that a function is a reusable block of code that performs a specific task. A reusable block of code that performs a specific task. Okay. So instead of repeating a code, you can define a function and define a function once, and then you can call it whenever you need it. Okay. Now, for instance, we have a function, an inbuilt function called print. Now, whatever that is composed of, or whatever that function is made of, is a material to us. So what we know is that we call print, and it does the work that print was designed to do. So let me quickly add here that in programming, these same functions that we are talking about, the moment you define a function inside of a method, inside of a class, that function becomes a method. So when you hear people saying method call, and so on and so forth, it is actually a function that is defined inside of a class. Okay. Now, variables are called variables outside of a class, but inside of a class, they become attributes or properties of that class. Okay. So you need to understand this so that maybe whenever we start mentioning classes, objects, properties, methods, those things are not going to be a second language to you. You will be part of it. So let me quickly call up my VS Code. We'll have a VS Code here. So the moment since you guys say that you like white theme, let me quickly change this thing. Okay, let me quickly go back to my dark theme so that it will help my eyes. All right. So, and let's create the 6.py. Okay. So I am now in the 6.py. So the moment I type the print command, you'll notice if I hover over this, you'll now see that print is actually a function because of this keyword. All right. So this is the keyword that is used to define function. Okay, we're going to come to that. And then whatever you see inside of this bracket is whatever that you find there is called arguments. All right, or parameters, function parameters. Now we are going to come to that. So a function is a reusable block of code. I just showed you that example to tell you that print is actually a function. Now we've actually talked about input too. So input is also a function. So if I hover over it, you will now see it. And there are several other functions, inbuilt functions in this. So this is actually also a function. All right. So this is it. Let's continue our work. All right. So with a function, you can define this thing is printing this thing without a function, right? So what it means now is that each time you really have to print this and this, print this and this, and so you see yourself calling this again and again. So let me say, so for each write-up, you are now printing welcome to, or rather, maybe you are just printing welcome name. And before I can do this, I need to define name. I say name is set to okay, I have this. So if I run this program now, it's going to prompt me to enter my name. So when I say Eric, sorry, I didn't put our format string here. So if I print it again, so it says welcome Eric. Now, if I didn't use this thing and I'll have to enter any other name, that means I'm going to type this thing manually. Right? Excuse me. So, but if I want to define a function that welcomes people, so I wouldn't need to repeat this for every person that I want to welcome. So if I want to define a function that welcomes people, I'm going to first of all define the function using the def keyword. So how you define a function is that first you have to introduce the keyword def, meaning definition, and then you define the function name. And at this point in time, I want to call that name welcome. Okay, so I open a brace, a brace like this, and then I pass the argument that I want somebody to pass. And that argument now is name, the name argument. So the moment you finish this, and this is optional because some functions may not really have arguments, but we are coming to that. So at this point, I now put a colon. The moment I put colon and I press enter, it opens the block of code. What is it that happens inside of that function? So what I want is to tell it, you don't need to do any other thing. just to say, then whatever that is inside here, I can copy it and paste it here. All right. So this is it. Now, anytime you call this function, because this function has been defined as it is now, we've set this to be able to receive a value for this particular variable. All right. So at any time you run this program, it will request the user to enter the name value. So if you press this, it's going to say enter your name, and I enter Enrique and I type enter. You'll notice that nothing is being done. Why is it that nothing is done here? Because nothing is done because we have not called this function. Now, how do we call the function? It's very simple. Just call the name of that function, and then with the parameter, call that name with the parameter. At this point, the parameter is name. Okay, so whatever you call here is what is going to happen here. So this function will not work and until it is called. Let me take it this way. This one has potential. In other words, it has potential energy. Okay, so the energy that is inherent, what it has the energy to print, it has the ability to do something, but you have not asked it to do something. So when you are calling the function, you are activating it, you are telling it to do something. All right. So at this point in time, if I run the program again, they enter your name. So I enter my name again. I press enter. It now says, welcome, Enrique. Now, if I want to repeat this, I don't need to start printing it again and again and again and again. Okay, so now, as it is now, I can decide to come to this place and quickly change the names. All right. Change this to Izu. And change this one again to, I can change this one. Okay, so as it is now, I don't need to start writing the thing from the beginning. I just need to run this. And you notice that I have to run the first one before these ones that are here should be able to run. So I can say that this guy's name is now Chigozie. So as I press enter, every other one will run. So this is the one I supplied. These are the other instances. Okay, just like what you can have here. All right. So we talk about defining a function, and this is what I have done now. So the syntax for defining a function is, first of all, the use of the def keyword. And after the definition keyword, you have the function name, whatever you want to name your function. Remember how we said we name variables. Okay, so you don't start naming a function with whatever, maybe a number or whatever. So just take the way you name variables to also name functions. And then you have parameters that you can pass into the function. Okay, if that function is requiring parameters, then you must state the parameters that is required. We're going to come to the issue of parameters later. Then you have the optional docstring. Okay, now this returns what the function does. Okay, you kind of explain what the function does. I want you to make it a practice of defining what a function does the moment you create that function. All right, so that tomorrow you may come back to that function and then you should be able to know why you created that function at the first instance. Another thing that I want to say again is that when you are naming your function names, don't just name arbitrary names because that name follows an agreed upon sequence. Now, don't just name it. Name function names that are related to what you are doing. Okay. then a function can as well return a value. Okay, then you see the block of code, and maybe after the computation of that block of code, it can now return a value. All right, so that is it. You see a simple function which I've done. See how you define the function, an example of how you define the function. And when you want to call the function, you call it this way. Now, this is a greet function, okay? But when you look at this, you see that there's no argument here. The reason is because this function was not designed to collect parameters. There's no argument that it is designed to take. But when you develop or rather design a function to take in parameters, you must call the function using those parameters. All right. Now, this is function with parameters. When you want to greet, okay, look at this function. The name of this function is greet user. Now, you needed to take in the name of that user so you can print hello user. Okay, so if you want to call that user now, call that function now, you are going to call the name of that function, and then you open the parentheses and then call that whatever that you want to replace the parameter with. Now, this is the parameter 8. So you call whatever instance of name that you want to call. Now, when you look at the example that I wrote here, you discover that I also made this a bit dynamic so that anybody can quickly enter his or her name, and then we welcome that person. So, for instance, this can be a welcome page of a website, for instance, and the moment you open the page, it will say enter your name. So when you enter your name, it will now welcome you, just like what you do when you log in. And the moment you log in, you will see your name somewhere. For instance, if I open, just like I logged in to my email here, you just see my whatever here, okay? And as you look at it, it shows you my details. Okay, so that is it. That is it for function with parameters. Now we're going to be looking at function with return statements. Function with return statements. So sometimes you may want a function to compute and return a value instead of just printing that value. Now, the difference is that when you return a value, you can take that function for further computation. For instance, we have a function that adds two numbers that you put in there. Let's look at it in the code. Let me quickly. Okay. So here, we define a function. Let's just say function subtract values. Or rather, function find the difference. Now, difference between what and what? A comma B. So inside of this, I can say difference is set to A minus B. All right. A minus B. And then I say return difference. I hope that makes sense. I say find the difference, and I say that what I want you to look for difference is A and B, and the difference now is what I did here. The difference between A and B is A minus B, and I say whatever you compute here, assign it to this, and then return the value. Now, if you call this function, now, want to say something?
Okay, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Does functions in Python, do they require curly braces?
Did I put curly brace? Oh my goodness. Don't worry, I'm coding Python and PHP is in my hand. It's already
Okay,
putting, it's already telling me that there's problem here. So it doesn't require curly brace. Thank you for bringing me back. It
okay,
would have
sir.
been to refuse to run that I will find out. So, okay, so that is it. It doesn't require curly brace. Now, what we now say, this is how we call this function now. But you notice that this function is not printing anything. So even if I call this function now, we are not going to see anything. This is showing me error because I removed the input. So let me quickly comment them out. So if I run this again now, so you see now this is not showing me anything. You know why? Because I returned the value. So if I want something to happen, I may now just say print the difference. So I can just say print this. Because this thing holds a value now, because it's returning a value. So, and the value does not have any print command on it unless I print it. So if I run this now, it's showing me 54, right? Because the inputs are what? 64 and 10. So if you subtract 10 from 64, you are going to have now another thing that happens here is that if you kind of require a function to return value, that means you can use that function for computation. So let's just say that you can now say that total is set to the difference times 2. So this works. Now, but for complexity, or rather for simplicity's sake, we can, for simplicity's sake, we can set this as a variable. Maybe we'll call it value is set to this, and then we say multiply value, whatever be the value, by 2. I hope that makes sense. So when you call this function, is going to, the value that is here is going to be stored in this value variable. So you can now multiply the variable by 2. So if I run this, I'm going to get what? 108, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, see, I didn't even print the value, the total now. So let me quickly print the total. So if I run this, I'm getting 108. So the point I'm making is that when you ask a function to print something, the moment you call that function, it executes that statement written inside of it. Okay, but if you tell it to return a value, it means that you have in mind to perform an operation based on the value that it returns to you. Okay, so that is it. Let's go on. Okay, the function computes A and B and then returns result. The return statement ends the function and sends the result back. Okay, next we talk about functions with argument, types of arguments. Now, there are different types of arguments, and we are going to be dealing with each of them. Okay, number one is positional argument, which is what I've been working on here. Now, when we talk about positional argument, we talk about the function whose arguments and you mind the argument. All right, I don't know how to say it. Sorry, mind the position of the argument. All right. Now, look at the students, this function. Look at this function. This is students' information. And in student information, the first argument here is name, and the second argument is age. Okay. So, and when you look at this, you discover that the name variable, depending on the value of that variable, is actually going to be what? A string based on our understanding. And then assuming that this is a strictly typed language, okay? Because if it's a strictly typed language, at this point in time, when you want to declare this, you are going to put the type. For instance, if you are coding Java and you want to declare a function, the argument, rather, the parameter that you are going to pass here, the type must be stated. So if you are looking to pass a name here, then you must declare this of type string, and then this of type integer. I think that is the way I can explain this thing better. Position and argument. Now, what it means is that if you declare this to be a string and this to be an integer, you cannot call this function as you are having here and then have your first argument to be an integer, whereas you declared it to be a string. And you cannot call this one to be a string, whereas you declared it to be an integer. All right. So what we mean is that if you are using positional argument, then when calling the function, you must be very careful to ensure that the first argument in the first position must match the variable name you placed in that first position. And the second argument must match the second, and the third must match the third, and so on and so forth, because it is strictly working based on the position of those arguments. Are you getting what I'm saying? Let's quickly. Yes. Any question? Do you want to say something?
I just said yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So if I paste this here, kind of trying to give another example here. All right, so this student information, this is name, and this and that. So if I run this program, it's going to print name is Chisom, okay? Name Chisom, age this. So let me just, so it's now say name Chisom, age this. Now, if I made mistake and then I passed in integer here, and then I passed Chisom here. If I made that mistake, so if I run this, what's going to happen? It is now telling me that name is 20, which is wrong, and the age is this. I hope you're seeing the disadvantage here. Okay, so if you are passing this, if you're passing an argument here, number one of the advantages of this is that the syntax is short. So you can easily pass name, age, and so on and so forth. Now, when the parameters you want to pass are really long, you may make mistakes along the line when the thing becomes a large program. Now, that will bring us to the next one, keyword arguments. So if you're using keyword arguments at this point in time, you will need to, if you are using keyword, you will need to define the inputs. Okay. So when you call this function now, you are going to state what the age is and the this thing is, the name is. So let's just come to that place. And so instead of just calling this way, you can now say age is set to 20, and then name is set to Chisom. So when we print this, is it going to work? Now see what's going to happen. What is the matter? Okay, I didn't say this is AHE, not H. Okay. So when you run this, you now see that it's actually assigned it, although the names, the variables are flipped. But since we defined our inputs here, it was very, very clear to the system, to the program, that, okay, the first input that this guy is adding here is calling here is actually the age input, while the second one is the name input. And so the system is able to profile and to call the things in order. All right. So the two things that we are looking at here is positional argument, positional arguments. And then the next one is keyword argument. Okay, so let me just read. Okay, this one is keyword. Okay, so for this, we're going to have this, or this, call it after the. Okay, so both ways work. Now, finally, and another one is default. How does default work? The default works by you assigning the value at inception. Okay, so when you look at this default argument, it says assign default values to parameters. Now look at in my function definition, what happens here? I said name is set to greet. Now this works when nobody has entered anything. All right, so if I define this variable, sorry, this function, if I define this function and I call the function, so if I call the function greet, immediately it's going to work. Since I did not pass any argument when calling the function, it is going to take the default argument that was passed during the creation of the function. So if I pass this, I'm getting hello guest. But if I decide to pass a value to it, and I say Izu, so the moment I pass it, it's going to now call my name when it's calling the function. All right, so this is default argument. So in default argument, you want your system not to. Okay, let me just take, for instance, when you develop your program. For instance, let me just go back to my email. So when you come to email here, you may quickly write a function that places this. I hope you can see the icon of my picture here, just as you can see your own when you log into your email. I hope you can see it.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So you can write a program that places an avatar here, something like an avatar, or that automatically places maybe the first letter of your name, or the first letter of your name and the second letter of your name. For instance, let me just come to this place now. Okay. Now, when you are looking at this, you will now notice that these icons that are here are coming from your names, whatever. Okay. So when you see Ndubisi Chi something, you see NC. My own, Azubike, my first name, and my this name. Okay. So you can write a program that places this thing when the user have not actually uploaded his picture. Are you getting it? So I'm just trying to tell you something now. So the moment you write a function that places an avatar picture at that position when the person has not uploaded his image, but if the person has uploaded his image, is now going to take the part of that image as the parameter and then display it at that point. Okay, so that is where an example of where you can use a default argument and so on and so forth. And also, if you are not logged in, the system may be calling you guest or whatever. So, but when you log in now, it may start calling you by your name. Okay. So, for instance, if you come to that place again, let me show you. If you hover your mouse, you are going to see my name here, Izuerike. Now, but if you are not logged in and you're able to access a page, maybe the person creating the stuff deliberately placed that bar there by default. When you hover over it and you are not logged in, it may be calling that place guest. But when you log in, it will now replace, that thing will be like a placeholder that will now accept your name and display it there. Okay, that's another place. Then another arguments that I want to look at is variable length arguments. Variable length arguments. Now, for instance, when you look at this function that we've defined, you'll discover that you cannot pass more than one variable here. Let's just assume to come to this place and one variable is declared here, which is name. And you'll come here to create this and age. Is it going to work? Let's see. So you now notice that it is not working. Why? It says, look at the error here, type error. Greet takes from 0 to 1 positional arguments, but 2 were given. All right. It means that I can call greet without any argument, that is 0 argument, and it will work. I can as well call it with just 1 argument and it will work. But me adding another argument to it is telling me that it takes only from 0 to 1 argument. Okay, now, when we talk about variable length argument, what do we do about it? Okay, this when you don't know how many arguments will be passed, when you don't know how many arguments that will be passed, so you just use the star and then call the arguments, or rather the whatever, the name of that variable that will be passed inside of that. Okay, now let me just, from this place you say add all. Now instead of adding all, you now say add the numbers. Now if you now separate 2 numbers, okay, let's just write. Let's just type this. Okay. Now, this is the name of the function, add all. And what we are talking about all is this. And we'll say okay. Now, this is add all function. And this add all function takes variable number of arguments. And how we know that is the use of this star. Okay, this star shows that we can take more than one. All right. We can take more than one. And then we now use the for loop to loop over the numbers that are there. And then for each loop, what is happening here? What is happening in this function? We've created a local variable here that is called total. Now, we initialize the total to 0. We say for each iteration here, add the first element of the argument, the first element of the argument to the value of total and store it in total again. That is what this thing is doing. Add, this thing is equal to this thing is the same thing as total plus this. Do you understand? That thing is the same shorthand for this. So we got what is here and we added n to it, and we stored it in this in the first iteration. So in the second iteration, we now got what is there, the current total, and then we add the second number in series to it, and so on and so forth. So in the first instance, we got 0 and we added 1 to it, it becomes 1. In the second instance, we got 2. Sorry, we got the total, which is now 1. We added 2 to it, it becomes 3, and we stored it in total again, and so on and so forth. So that is what happens here, and then that is what happens here. Now, the point we are making now is that in this particular version here, we actually called 3 arguments here. And then in this particular version, we called how many arguments now? 4. So that means this function is kind of dynamic. Okay, sorry. This function is kind of dynamic. So it takes different arguments, different number of arguments. So if we run it, you will notice that it will still run. So the first one gives us what? 6. While the second one gives us 100. Because this is 10 plus 20, 30 plus 30, 60 plus 40, 100. All right. So this is variable number of arguments. Okay, variable length arguments. If you want to create functions that is going to take that number of arguments, then you do that. Okay. Now let's look at an example. Okay, maybe I'll okay, let me just give, right? How many of you were able to solve the assignments? The particular assignment I gave, the one I typed, or rather the one I was inspired to give. This particular assignment, I didn't read some of your charts here because I didn't have time. Now, I'm going to give another assignment now based on this. Now you're going to write a function that creates a list of students based on the number of, or the names, the number of names that is passed to that function. A list of students based on the number of names that is passed to that function. Somebody getting what I'm saying? Hmm? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we need.
Yes,
We
sir.
can hear you, sir, but 5 minutes.
Huh?
We can hear you, sir, but are you going to type it for us after the class?
Let me type it here now and send it.
Okay, sir.
Okay, I've sent it to the WhatsApp group. Create a function that creates a variable list of students based on the names that is passed to the function. Okay. Now, that's variable length argument. Okay, then next is, okay, for you now to do that, you see how we passed this. Okay, we used the star over the values that we want to pass. Now, in this one, we are looking at, what's the title of this? Okay, this one is for keyword arguments. All right, keyword arguments. Thought I placed the title there. Okay, this is for non-keyword arguments, but you are still doing the same thing for keyword arguments. Now, for keyword argument, instead of passing one star, you are going to pass 2 stars to it. Now, when we talk about keyword argument, we are talking about passing the value based on, this one is variable length keyword argument. Let me use it that way now. Excuse me. Okay, so this one is that you don't know the number of names or whatever that you want to pass, but each item that you are passing there has to come with the key value pair. Okay, that kind of dictionary approach. So this can be used to pass in the value of, or rather the record of a person inside of, you can use that function to call up a value or record of a person, an individual person. So when we look at this, we use this example, it says show information of the students, or maybe show students information. Now, we don't know the number of information or the number of data that is going to be passed, all right? So, but whatever we want to pass it in a key value pair, okay, so that is going to make meaning when we call it. Okay, so if you want to create a function that way, you are going to first of all create this, and then whatever you title to be the value of, or the details of that person, you put it there. So for you now to be able to iterate over it, we are going to also use the for loop to iterate over such. Okay. So you now see, let's look at this. And we can manipulate this code to see what we are doing. Let me quickly highlight, comment on that. So okay, so if we run this now, it's showing us this. Now, for key and value, in this thing becomes a kind of dictionary, all right? Becomes a kind of dictionary, because whatever that we are bringing is coming in a key value pair. Now, so this thing is kind of talking about the details, and the details, the items, you use this particular function now to be able to call this function upon the input that you are placing here, so as to be able to get each of them, okay? So that you'll be able to get the value, the key value pair of whatever that you are going to pass here. Let's assume that this is actually a dictionary, as the case may be. Now you are using this to iterate over each of the elements, each of the items in the in the dictionary. And for each item now, you separate it into key value pair. You know, when you talk about a dictionary, you have something like, maybe something like details is equals. So you have something like this. So the very first element is going to be the key, maybe the name. And then you have colon. And then the second element is going to be the value of that dictionary, which may be Emeka. And this is one item. This is one item. And then another item is going to come in. You notice that until I finish this, I did not put a comma. So the next item is going to be maybe something like age. Now this age is going to now be, this age is going to be maybe 21. Then you find another. So all the keys are going to be passed in as strings. And then all the values are going to be passed in based on the type of the input or the type of value that thing is. Okay. Now, another one now, let me just say another one, maybe bank balance. So this one is going to be something like maybe something like this. So when you look at this now, you notice that the first one, the key is, if you come to this side. So if you come to this side, this first one is string. The value here is string name. This one is age. The value is integer 21. This one now is what? Bank balance is also string, but the value now, instead of being whatever, it is now what? A float, and so on and so forth. So the point I'm trying to make is that in declaring a dictionary, inside of the key value pair, the keys are always strings, whereas the values are going to take the type of the value that you want to pass. Now, if you have, or rather, possibly this may not really make sense here, because Python does automatic type inference. So it assigns type based on the value that you assign to any key. But why I'm making this point blank is that you may come along in a programming language that is statically typed, and you must, at that point, declare the type of that variable at that side. Okay, so that you will not have to make mistakes. Okay, I delete this. So now, because of this, when you call this, you notice that now this is variable keyword argument, right? So when you call this, you now place, even if you remove this, even if you remove the country and run the program, it's still going to run. If you add the country and even add another thing that says maybe that balance, so the very first thing that is going to be there is what now? Okay, you now say balance. Is set to the balance is set to. So if you have something like this and you run it, it's still going to work. So what it means is that if you want to iterate over a number of key value pairs that you don't know what it may grow into in the future. So instead of using just variable length argument, you can use variable length keyword arguments to be able to do that. And you see the way you can run it. So this can as well be something like, okay, when we talk about this, is better it better works on dictionaries than in lists. But here that I gave you an assignment based on lists, I know that lists can work here too. Okay. Then there's this important thing that we need to understand, and that is about variable scope. When we talk about scope, we are talking about where the variable can be accessed and where it cannot be accessed, where you can access a variable and where you will not be able to access a variable. Now, in Python, when you declare a variable outside of the function, that variable becomes accessible anywhere, including inside of a function. Okay, but if you declare a variable inside of a function, it can only be accessible inside of that function. And so when variables are declared inside of a function, they are called local variables. But when variables are accessed outside of a function, they are called global variables. But you can enforce a variable inside of a function to become a global variable by using the global keyword. Now let's look at examples. Now you see this example, we define this my function, and inside of it, we define a variable x that has the value of 5. And this is a local variable. So if we print now, if we say, and inside of this, you can call this print function. Now, what happens is that this print function is called from inside of the variable. Now, let's look at it. Permit me to select this and delete all. So I call this, okay, I call this my function. Okay. And I say x is set to 5. Okay. And then I say print x, or print, let me just say print inside of the function. Okay. What am I printing inside of the function? X. So I've defined this function as a complete block of code. So outside of this function now, I can call my function. And the moment I call my function, is going to execute this entire stuff. But if I come outside of this function and then call the print command, and I want to call x, you just notice that I will not be able to print this. Now let's quickly look at this first. So if I run this program now, you notice that it says inside of the function, and then it printed x, that is 5. Now, if I remove this and I run the program again, you now see that something is wrong. What is it telling us? What is it telling us? It is telling us that x is not defined. But is x not defined? No, x is actually defined inside of this function. And that is why this one cannot access it. All right. Now, if x, now talking about outside function, that's global scope. If now we copy this, or rather I'll cut this, and I place it inside of this function, outside of this function, this automatically becomes a global variable because it is both accessible inside of this function and outside of the function. Now, to print it or to make it better, I can now say that this one is outside. Outside. So if I run the program again, you will notice that inside of the function runs because this is global. Therefore, this is accessible to this function. This is accessible to this function. And then, since it is global, it is accessible also to the print function. So this is what we call print variable scope. So this is global variable. When you declare it inside of a function, it will remain accessible only inside of that function. And that will be it. Now, if we want something, to be outside of the function or to be accessed, maybe you created something inside of the function, but you want it outside, you want it accessible outside of the function. You can still do that by naming that variable global. All right. Now, if I come to this place and now said global y is set to say that statements must be separated by new lines. Okay, let me see. Okay, so what is saying that I should have separated, declared a variable y, and then set it this way. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that if I have this, first of all, I declared a variable as a global, all right? And then I set a value inside of it. Ordinarily, without this keyword, this should be kind of by, okay, this remains, okay. Okay. Okay, so ordinarily, as it is now, this is a local variable, ordinarily. So if I run this program, something is wrong, okay? Something is wrong. It says y is not defined, but there is y here. When the line that is saying that is outside the function, right? It says outside of the function is saying that y is not defined. As a matter of fact, it has placed a jagged line on it, telling me that it's actually not defined. But is it really not defined? It is actually defined, but it's defined at a local scope. Now, if I remove this, and you just notice immediately that the jagged line that was here is no longer. So if I run this program again, it's now saying inside of the function, this is a beautiful day, and then out this is a beautiful day. Now, the point we're trying to make is that even if you declare a variable inside of a function and you want to make it, you want to enforce it to become global, you are going to use the global keyword in front of that variable. You declare it once, and then you assign the value here. You notice that when I wanted to declare it at once and the assignment at once, declaration and the assignment at once, it gave me error. So first you need to declare it first, and then you assign value to that variable. Okay. So I think we are coming to the end of this class here. Then we look at built-in functions. Python has many ready-made functions you can use without even defining your own, okay? It will be a kind of reinventing the wheel when you know that Python has actually created some functions on its own. They have written the function for you to use, so there will be no need you trying to create your own function. So you see a table of a few of them. The length function, we have used it. So we have used the length function. Now you will have the max function, the mean function. You can use this to, maybe you have a list of students and you use the max function to know the student that scored the highest mark in the list. This one, you can use it to know the person with the least mark, okay? Then you can use this to sum all of them, all the marks in series or in the list. You can use this to find the type, the data type of an element that is enclosed in it. And then you have this to generate numbers depending. And we told ourselves that when you use the range keyword, or rather the range function, if you just have only one argument, then we are talking about starting at index 0, ending at the index instated, okay? And then if you have two arguments, the first index becomes is the start index, while the second one is the stopping index. If you have three arguments, the first index becomes the start index, the second the stopping index, and the third one becomes the step. Okay, we have also the int, the float, the string. These values, we have them for type conversion. So you can go on your own and find out several other functions that are ready-made in Python. And then we can have nested functions. Function can also be defined inside of other functions, as you can see. Okay, I think I will leave you now to look at these ones. You know, it's just this from this to 9. Okay, and then we enter the example, practical example, a simple calculator. Okay, so please make sure you type these examples yourself. Make sure you type the examples yourself. Don't just copy it. I am copying and pasting for the purpose of fastening our class, hastening it up. Okay, so but it is good that you will type. When you copy and paste, you may not be building yourself into managing errors, because when you type by yourself, you will definitely meet errors while doing so, and it will help you. The moment you start debugging errors, that's when you start having fun with programming. Okay, so I encourage you to type, even if you are going to replicate whatever that is here, please make sure you type it yourself. Don't just copy it and paste it. Okay, so that is one. Then number two is that when you are typing, feel free to make some adjustment in whatever that you are seeing here. Feel free to make some adjustments and realize what is showing you, what the output is like at every point in time. And then look at this hands-on lab exercises. Write a function that welcomes user, that prints a personalized greeting, and so on and so forth. All of this, make sure you carry out each and every one of them, and seek help elsewhere in order to solve it. When you are doing so, you are consolidating your hands and writing Python programs. Okay, thank you very much. I'll take some few questions before we call it a day. So if you have questions, you may please bring it along. Questions? Questions?